Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto_X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. There were multiple things wrong when Satsuki Uchiha woke up. Her eyes weren't even open, and Satsuki knew she was definitely not in her studio apartment. First, the bed was plusher than her own. She only ever used the thin cotton sheet, but the bed she was in had a fluffy duvet that was soft and heavier than what she was accustomed to, especially since Satsuki had the bad habit of falling asleep on her futon without any covering in the area she designated as the living room. Second was the lack of smell of oil paints drying and the chill usually brought in by the window she had to leave open so that she didn't breathe in all of the fumes. Third, and most concerning, Satsuki usually slept in a tank top and underwear because she got overheated at times, but she refused to sleep in the buff. She had friends that didn't understand boundaries, and Satsuki never wanted to be caught in the troublesome situation of needing to run out because of a fire or another type of emergency and Satsuki opened her eyes, only wide enough to peer through her lashes and knew immediately she was nowhere that she had ever been before. The hazy light purple hue of the walls was a big clue to that. How much did I drink last night? Satsuki sighed and turned on her side and snuggled into the sheets, fully prepared to apologize to sis girlfriend for taking her bed for the night. It was nice of her to sacrifice her bed for her boyfriend's drunk friend. My head hurts. Did I? Feeling more awake, Satsuki's neck and ears heated up when she noticed the pleasant throb in her core, usually only present after a moment of indulgence. Hopefully, she had at least waited until she was alone before she decided to drunkenly pleasure herself. Sai would never let her live it down and was likely to bring it up around their friends. Satsuki was still trying to recover from the incident at K-Ba when she was caught in his bathtub after she smoked up that joint. She refused to smoke again. Inebriation did an odd thing to her libido. Probably doesn't help that she was at Ino's party. Satsuki grumbled inwardly, curling more into herself. A small murmur had Satsuki opening her eyes in shock. Now with her eyes open, she could see the tuft of pink hair poking out from under the duvet. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Satsuki lifted the duvet and peeked underneath. Choking on a sharp intake of air, Satsuki slowly slid out of bed away from the small, curvy body that was lying next to her. As silently as possible, Satsuki searched for her clothes and pulled them on. She panicked when she was unable to find her ID or phone, but then found them in one of her boots, which was tossed somehow onto the vanity. Checking one last time that her bedmate was still asleep, Satsuki slipped out of the room and tiptoed down the stairs. Noticing a lack of a roommate or other resident, she relaxed and made her way to the front door. With her hand on the doorknob, Satsuki paused and took one last look up the stairs to where her bedroom was located. She chewed on her lower lip and let go. She slipped back into the kitchen and started up the coffee maker. She stared at the fancy single-cup Keurig and placed a mug underneath the dispenser. Running a hand through the mass of knots that her hair was, Satsuki nodded to herself and quickly scrambled out of the apartment. As soon as she was outside, she booked it, running for 4 blocks before pulling over to a corner and squatting, tucking her head between her knees. What did I do? She first saw her 3 months ago. Satsuki dropped by the only bookstore that carried a copy of a book she had been waiting on. A store in a part of the college town she lived in that she usually avoided because of all of the posh shops that were frequented by frat brothers and the bevy of sorority girls that trailed after them. A part of town that you wouldn't spot any other torn paint splattered outfits. She was so far from the comfort of her studio in her torches. Satsuki normally didn't care about what people thought of her, but she was always reminded of her family whenever she came across people completely unlike her. She didn't look or dress the right way for her mother, and although as supportive as he could be, her father would have preferred that she hadn't pursued a career in glass sculpting. When it came to looks, Satsuki's face was almost identical to her mother's, but instead of silky hair, she had unruly thick locks, and she was a beanpole, tall and sharp with no curves, the complete opposite of petite and soft Makoto Uchiha. Makoto would have preferred for her daughter to dress feminine and neat, sort of like the small girl in the same row that Satsuki was currently in. Satsuki took a sideways glance at the petite woman in her fluttery dark floral pattern fit and flare dress that fell to her knees. She had polished black Mary Jane shoes and flesh-toned stockings. She was the exact model for what her mother would have wanted Satsuki to dress like minus the rose gold hair. So pink. Satsuki was about to go about her business when she heard the soft thump of a bag falling and then the creaking of metal. She looked up to see the petite woman trying to scale up the bookcase. Hey! The woman squeaked when Satsuki lifted her by her armpits and set her back down on the ground. Which one? Satsuki raised her hand up and pointed at the top shelf. She was much taller, standing just shy of 6 foot in her combat boots than the other woman. The blue one. Satsuki raised an eyebrow at the woman's method of descriptor. A title name would have been the correct way to describe which book she wanted. Tugging it out of its place, she scanned the cover. Principles of Biochemistry, a med student. Satsuki blinked and pulled her gaze away from the book down to the woman she was helping. For a moment, Satsuki was frozen. Jade eyes peered up at her, looking unique yet familiar at the same time. She was so busy admiring the gold that circled the stranger's pupils that she almost didn't catch the fact that she was being gawked at. Glossy pink lips parted slightly before spreading into a wide grin, showcasing a set of tiny pearl-white teeth. Thank you. Her voice was breathy, and a manicured hand flew to her for 4 locks to run her hand through her pink hair and tuck a strand behind her ear. My boss needs this book, and she'd probably have my head if I couldn't get it. Satsuki's eyebrows furrowed, drawn down in confusion. She didn't require an explanation. She was about to tell the stranger, so when an irritating chirping sound blared from the oversized bucket-style bag on the floor. Oh, the stranger cursed. Breaking the gentle and prim facade. Satsuki stopped believing in the moment the woman had decided to start climbing up the shelves of the bookcase. I'm going to be so late. She gave Satsuki one last look before taking off down the aisles at a fast pace. The next few times she saw her, Miss Jade Eyes was always in the middle of some sort of dash to whatever her destination was. Satsuki had never seen a more busier person. Well, other than her mother, who ended up needing to hire a personal assistant. As soon as she had that thought, it clicked in her brain what the stranger's job could be. She had told Satsuki that she was picking up a textbook for her boss. She had a constantly chirping phone that signaled her presence. Like right now, Satsuki was just sketching away as she waited to meet a new client that asked for a face-to-face meeting. A cigarette caught between her lips when the annoying electronic chirping rang from somewhere behind her. She turned around and there the woman was speed-walking and juggling multiple shopping bags. Although she was a distance away, Satsuki could tell she was upset with whoever was on the other end of the phone. Her nose wrinkled when her mouth twisted in distaste. Satsuki could almost hear her scoff when her pale eyebrows drew forward and her mouth fell open and into a scowl. A moment later, her seafoam green eyes went wide and her face turned bright red. Embarrassment. Cute. Satsuki smirked to herself. This pink-haired stranger was interesting. It was at least amusing to watch how animated she was. It was completely different than the composed personal assistance her own mother went through. Satsuki watched her flag down a cab. She was small and had to make herself seen by hopping up and down and waving her outstretched hand furiously. She watched her as she loaded the cab with all of her goods, only brought back to reality by a coughing sound. Mizuchiya. Satsuki stood up and shook her client's hand. Ignoring the heat creeping up her neck, she switched to professional mode. As she talked to the man that wanted a custom lampwork sculpture from her, she thought back to what the pink-haired PA was wearing. Neat white tight-legged pants paired with a striped blouse under a navy blazer. Stylish and the proper attire for her profession. Completely different from Satsuki's baggy oversized gray sweater with the stretched-out collar and her scuffed-up boots. A girl that was the complete opposite of her. Satsuki found out that her name was Sakura Haruno a month after their first meeting. She was on her way home from her studio at Glass and Iron toting yet another implosion marble with green and gold spirals. Kakashi had lectured her again about wasting materials and time and put her back on making orders for the Glass and Iron catalog as punishment. She wouldn't be allowed to take on any commissions for the next month, but it did free her up to practice more of her welding work. Satsuki didn't even bother with finding a seat and grabbed the overhead railing of the subway car. She was tall enough that it wasn't a strain on her, and Satsuki knew that if she took a seat in her tired state, she would fall asleep and miss her stop. Again, it wasn't the usual annoying chirping of her phone that drew Satsuki's attention this time. There was a very irritated voice huffing as the doors opened 3 stops into Satsuki's ride home. Yes, Sakura Haruno. Although annoyed, the breathy voice was familiar. Satsuki paused in her search for a desired song to listen to. She peeked over her shoulder and saw the pink-haired personal assistant. She had her cell phone trapped between her cheek and her shoulder and an iPad mini in her hands. Yes, I'm sure that's my name. Sakura rolled her eyes. Look, I'm on the train right now and I'm going to lose signal. I'll call you back when I get off and I hope you're able to find my order. The last woman you would want to displease is Dr. Senjuko. The Sakura girl sat down in the first available seat and immediately pulled out a giant binder and flipped through color-coded notes and scrolling through her tablet. Satsuki watched her mumble to herself as she typed out on her tablet. Whenever she seemed to be stuck on something or thinking over it more thoroughly, she would wrinkle her nose or bite her lower lip occasionally. Sometimes she would get a really proud look and she would wiggle her eyebrows or do a little shimmy in her seat. A small celebration for whatever small victory she had. Satsuki's stop came all too soon and her fun had to end. She no longer felt tired, but was a little disappointed that she couldn't continue watching Sakura, the woman she now knew the name of, be caught up in her own little world. It was odd how, in a city with a population of 681,170, that Satsuki kept coming across the pink-haired stranger she had helped out one day. It should have been impossible, but it was as though they were magnets pulling toward each other. The way their paths kept moving in circles around each other. There was just always something catching Satsuki's attention and drawing it to her. She wouldn't have thought anything about it, but it was impossible to dismiss the giddy feeling that floated in her stomach when she caught sight of Sakura's hair. In the late afternoon, her pink locks resembled the glass rods Satsuki heated with her torch. Petal pink turned into glowing orange under the sinking sun. Sunlight made it shine glossier than any lamp workpiece that Satsuki could mold. The silky strands would fall behind her, dancing in the breeze behind her small frame. Sakura resembled the glass Satsuki loved, delicate in appearance, but with so much potential to be something amazing. Sakura resembled the fire that Satsuki used to forge her pieces of art, brilliant and warm, but capable of becoming intense and burning those in her path with her fiery outbursts when she protected the order of her boss's life. And that was from just the small snippets of her life that Satsuki was privy to. If Satsuki were anyone else, she would insist that fate was trying to push them together. She would allow herself to believe the universe was aligning itself to give them the opportunity. But she wasn't that type of person. And Sakura was just a pretty stranger. Someone so different from her that their lives would flow in parallel, never intersecting. Ino said, "I was a bad friend because I let you hold yourself up in that factory you call a studio and in your apartment." Sai had picked Satsuki up on his moat after she noticed that her transport pass was missing from its place in her boots as she was unable to take the subway or a bus. She would have walked back home, but she was so hungover she didn't want to move. And the running she did upon discovery of whose bed she was in didn't help in the slightest. Satsuki held her head high and tried to appear dignified. But as soon as Sai had reached her apartment building, she fell off the moped and vomited on the curb. "You would be a better friend if you left me alone and didn't let me near any alcohol." She attempted to brush her freshly washed hair, but ended up getting the brush stuck in her messy hair. Satsuki would have kept her hair short if it weren't for the fact it stuck up in the back. She was a giant and thin as a toothpick. She didn't want her hair to look like a duck's as well. Ino would beg to differ. "We can get your metro card from Sakura later. I'm sure you left it back at her place." Satsuki narrowed her eyes at Sai, but he just smiled back at her and handed her a cup of coffee. "Stop trying to act like a good friend after you handed me off to a stranger to take care of me instead of taking responsibility." Stranger. Sakura is not a stranger. And besides, you practically followed her home. Did not. Did so. Sai pulled out his phone. "I think she even posted selfies of you guys from the party on Instagram last night before you two decided to see who could hold their liquor better. For your information, it wasn't you. What the hell even happened last night? You don't recall anything." Satsuki shook her head slowly and looked at Sai expectantly. Sai just smiled again, stood up from her futon, and headed for the door. "Sai, you were right. I should give you your space. I'll talk to you later. Get back here." Without looking back at her, Sai left. Satsuki let out a groan and fell back onto her futon that she wished deeply she had woken up on that morning. "What did I do?" Sakura woke up shivering. She was usually freezing when she woke up, but this morning the cold brought disappointment with it. Although she had fallen asleep, she was comfortable. A delicious warmth had been lying next to her, and she had the best sleep she had ever had in the past few months. For the moment she refused to acknowledge that it was probably due to the fact that she had gotten laid the night before. Sakura sighed and rolled out of bed. She stood on her toes and stretched, raising her arms over her head and let out a loud groan. Her body felt sore, but it was a pleasant kind of soreness like that of a good workout. A warmth started to spread from her cheeks down throughout the rest of her body. Good workout indeed. Sakura reached over for her work phone, the silver-cased one, and checked for any new messages. Sununade had weekends free, and although Sakura still had errands to run, it was one of the few lazy days she got where she could perform the tasks at her own leisure. Sununade and her husband Dan were being visited by their niece, Shizune, and Sakura had confirmed the day before that their reservations for the day were set. Taking a look around her bedroom, Sakura ran a hand down her face and groaned again. "Might as well pack up my stuff to take to the cleaners." Still walking around in the Sakura pulled out her laundry bag and sorted out what needed to be taken to the dry cleaner. She would drop off her stuff when she went to pick up's dry clean. Scrambling around putting her room back in order, she couldn't believe that two girls could do so much damage on their way to bed. Sakura glared at her overhead fan. Her favorite green lacy bra was hanging off it. She would need a step ladder to get it. So, she ignored it and carried on with cleaning. She ignored the random thought that a certain statuesque beauty could have easily plucked it for her. After her room was in order, the only thing left to clean was herself. Sakura should have considered doing that first, but she wanted to relax and not have to worry about the disarray in her room. Once in her bathroom, Sakura turned on the shower and waited for the water to heat up to her desired temperature. She turned to look at her reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror and she tilted her head from side to side, examining herself. Sakura had always been pale. Whenever her best friend Ino wanted to go tanning, Sakura would always return with a splash of darker freckles all over her body. Another downside to her pale skin was how she bruised easily. Hikis, kiss marks, love bites, whatever she wanted to call them, she was covered with them. There was a dusting of them over her and down her torso. There was a brilliant raspberry bloom on her collarbone. And when she looked further down, there were darker, more deeper impressions on her inner thighs. She recalled a mass of blue-black hair underneath her dark eyes glimmering from the light that streamed into her window from the street lamps outside. Long and thin calloused fingers gripping at the flesh of her thighs, holding her down to a tongue that teased her with gentle strokes only to turn harsh and rough when she squirmed. Sakura's pale skin colored to an obscene red when she further recalled the way she grinded her hips down on that mouth, riding Satsuki's face until her legs trembled and she came all over the striking woman's face. Sakura jumped into her shower and tried to rid herself of her thoughts and the longing in her core by scrubbing her body. She wished she were the kind of person that got drunk and blacked out. Sakura didn't want to keep the vivid memory of last night. Didn't want to remember the husky moans that escaped Satsuki's mouth when she wrapped her tongue around and tugged on her rings. Her were almost non-existent, but the dark-haired woman was extremely sensitive. Sakura sighed and pressed her forehead against the tiles of her shower cabinet. She let the water fall over her head, hiding the hot tears that flowed down her cheeks. When Sakura had imagined lying with the woman that had taken over her thoughts for the past few months, she never imagined waking up in bed alone. Sakura was always rushing everywhere. She never really did have time to relax and catch a break as she ran all over the city doing her boss's shopping and running her files from the hospital to the affiliated university she worked at. The only times she really had to relax was when she was preparing meals for Sununade and her husband. Senator Danko had his own PA who had insisted that the couple get a personal chef, but Sununade wouldn't hear any of it. She was a private woman who disliked having to deal with too many people going in and out of her home. That was why she hired Sakura. She did everything for her, took care of her home, her schedules, and anything else may need. Which is why she had gone that fateful day to pick up the latest edition of a textbook that required of her students. Sakura never minded her height. Yes, she was petite, but being short never held her back. Being short just meant that she had to be more resourceful, and climb up furniture sometimes. She didn't expect to be lifted into the air as if she were Simba from The Lion King and then put back on the ground. Which one? A husky voice like velvet asked. It was the kind of deep adult woman's voice she always wished she had instead of her breathy and somewhat childish one. Sometimes when she made phone calls, people still assumed it was a young teen calling. Sakura should have figured that the owner of such a voice would be beautiful. The tall person that assisted her in the retrieval of her book had a sort of androgynous sort of style. The edgy rocker look was in high contrast with the feminine angles of her face. The woman had sharp high cheekbones that Sakura would kill for. The kind usually found on a runway model. With her height, Sakura wouldn't doubt that the gorgeous woman in front of her was one. When she finally looked into her eyes, Sakura had to suppress a shiver. There was something so familiar about her eyes that she couldn't put her finger on. There was a lot about the woman that seemed familiar to her. Many people had dark eyes, but there was something about these eyes that called out to her. Large pupils surrounded by charcoal irises and another ring of black trapping that smoky color. Sakura could have stared at her all day, but her cell phone had to go off at that exact moment, reminding her that she needed to take a change of attire to Sunade, who was to attend a benefit dinner with Dan. Crushing down the disappointment that she had to leave before she could even get the stranger's name, Sakura gathered her things and went back to what she was supposed to be doing, managing the order of her boss's life. It was a job that she loved, but left her little room to enjoy her own life and the people she wanted to bring into it. Someone as striking in looks as the stranger she met in the bookstore couldn't be ignored. In fact, after having already seen her once, it made it easier to make her out in crowds. It was strange watching someone so beautiful do mundane things like grabbing a coffee or buying takeout. It was strange, but it made Sakura feel somewhat closer to this beautiful stranger. There were many differences between her and the beauty that kept catching her eyes. Sakura was designer. She couldn't deny it. But with friends like Ino and Karin Uzumaki, it was hard not to take an interest in fashion, especially when it impacted how others perceived her. She represented a renowned doctor and professor of medicine, and how she presented herself reflected on Sunjuko. And then there was the beautiful stranger with her wild hair and her paint splattered and torn up clothes. Sakura loved bling, but this stranger did it differently with steel jewelry that made her think of armor. Occasionally, she would catch some rings or bangles of glass. And even with its delicate and precious looks, they still complemented the chains and steel rings the stranger wore. The way the stranger carried herself was aloof, as if she didn't care what the world thought of her. Different from Sakura, who felt as though she always had something to prove. Sakura guessed the strange woman's last name long before she finally learned her first name. She was taking a shortcut through the sculpture garden when she spotted her beauty sketching away. Long limbs curled into herself as she guarded her view of her sketch pad from the glare of the sun. The dark-haired woman had her hair piled up in a high messy bun on her head. And as she made sure strokes of her pencil, Sakura was reminded of a different woman. It was strange that she never made the connection before, considering now that she took an even closer look at her face, the beauty looked like Makoto Uchiha. Makoto Uchiha was a fashion designer and happened to be the owner of the label that Sununade favored above all others when she needed something for all of the events she needed to attend. Because of Sununade's generous bosom, a lot of her clothing needed to be tailored or custom-made. Sakura was always running to Makoto's studio to make an order or pick one up. It was one of her favorite errands because although Makoto was an elegant woman, she was also very motherly and was always asking about her and offering her treats she bought in trips out of the country. When Makoto was in the middle of work, she would pile her luscious hair in a bun atop of her head, the same way the beauty did. Their slender necks and profiles were almost identical. Sakura wouldn't have been surprised if the beauty was related to Makoto somehow, especially since the Uchiha family seemed to be made up of the most beautiful people she had ever seen. Uchiha Sakura watched as her beauty turned to face an energetic brown-haired man with red triangles on his cheeks approaching her. Her stomach became heavy and she felt somewhat nauseous. She should have figured someone so beautiful would have a lover already. Sakura wasn't even aware that she had been hoping that the stranger had been single. Piss off, Inuka. If you want me to make your girlfriend something, you got to commission me. You don't get free just cause we're friends. Sakura answered her phone a little more cheerfully than normal and continued on her way. Her name was Satsuki. Sakura was dragged to a party at Ino's to celebrate the completion of Sai's upcoming showcase. Ino had found out about her technically free day the next day and insisted she joined them for drinks. It was a surprise that Ino's artist boyfriend was friends with her beauty, but it was a pleasant one. Her beauty looked cross, grumpy to be dragged to such a crowded place, and Sakura couldn't help but bite her lip to contain her smile. The woman was absolutely adorable. The woman became even grumpier when Sai ditched her to follow Ino around as she mingled with other guests. Sakura couldn't leave her alone. A combination of needing to help others and also her desire to spend time with her. She had a crush. Oh, was she crushing hard? Hello. Sakura knew she was batting her eyelashes, but she couldn't help it. It was instinctual for her to flutter her lashes when she was flirting. My name's Sakura. Sakura Haruno. I'm a friend of Ino's. She stuck her hand out, hoping to shake the woman's hand. Hesitantly, the woman reciprocated the gesture. Her hand was surprisingly warm. Sakura was sure it would be cold with all of the steel rings she wore. Satsuki Uchiha. Satsuki. A pretty name for a pretty girl. Sakura could just imagine what Satsuki would say about her own name considering her hair color. She had to imagine it because Satsuki didn't say anything after offering her name. Do you want to get a drink? Sakura offered. She felt oddly like the guys that used to try and pick her up when she and her friends went out. But that was technically what she was trying to do, wasn't it? Pick Satsuki up. Sakura had already decided when she saw her arrive and approach Sai that she was going to do something about their relationship as only strangers that happened to cross paths in the town. She wasn't only going to watch fragments of Satsuki's life. She wanted to be a part of it. After a beat of silence in which Sakura's smile started to pull down at the corners, Satsuki nodded her head. Yes. Sakura led Satsuki into Ino's kitchen and started listing off all of the options. People kept entering the kitchen to find more drinks and food. The more crowded it got, the more uncomfortable Satsuki became. The more uncomfortable she became, the more worried Sakura became that she would lose Satsuki's attention. In a surprising move, Satsuki grabbed a bottle of Jack in a six-pack and grabbed Sakura by the wrist and pulled her through the throng of people to Ino's empty deck. I don't like crowded places, Satsuki murmured. Her ears had a red tint that caused Sakura to giggle. Too freaking cute. So Sakura plopped her body down on the outdoor Kucho had taken from her parents' house when she moved out and patted the seat next to her. Satsuki saw the gesture and sat down next to her. If you don't like crowded places, why come to a party? Ino told Sai to bring me along. And well, have you known Sai to say no to Ino if it was something he thought was minor? Sakura giggled and shook her head. Ino was bossy, but she also knew how sweet Ino could be when it came to her boyfriend and how much Sai adored her. Here, Satsuki handed Sakura the bottle of whiskey, and Sakura took a swig of it. Sakura grinned slightly at her when she noticed how wide Satsuki's eyes went. Sakura handed the bottle back and raised her eyebrow at her in challenge. As they drank, Sakura did most of the talking and asking of the questions. But Satsuki seemed to be pretty attentive, even when it became obvious that she may have drank more than she could handle. Not that she was stopping. If Sakura drank, so did she. The alcohol was making Sakura feel really warm and giddy. Her eyes were getting droopy, but she didn't want to close them because then it meant she couldn't look at Satsuki. Satsuki was wearing an off-the-shoulder crop top that exposed her flat stomach. The later it got, and the more Sakura drank, the more she kept eyeing her midriff, thinking about licking her and sucking at the dip of her belly button. You're pretty. Sakura slurred and poked at Satsuki's cheek. Really pretty. The only thought Sakura had was how much she wanted to kiss her. Satsuki had a pretty mouth with a lower lip that was fuller than the upper lip. Sakura wanted to find out what she tasted like. Wondered if she wore lip gloss like she did, or if her lips really were that pretty shade of pink. So, she kissed her. It wasn't sloppy or hard, just a chaste pressing of lips together. When she pulled back, there was something in Satsuki's dark hooded eyes that made her stomach clench. That's it. That's hardly a kiss, Satsuki muttered, flipping her hair over her shoulder. Sakura gave her an urchin grin and slid into her lap, straddling her. I want to do a lot more than that. Sakura slid her hands over Satsuki's shoulders and cradled her neck in her hands. She stroked her jawline with her thumbs and leaned down, taking her full lower lip in between her teeth. She tugged on her lip and impressed another kiss, stroking Satsuki's lips with her tongue until Satsuki parted her mouth and let Sakura dip her tongue in to meet hers. Sakura slanted her mouth over Satsuki's at a slow, sensual pace. She moaned slightly when she felt Satsuki take hold of her waist. Sakura shivered slightly at the feel of Satsuki sliding her hands around and down her back. Satsuki had squeezed Sakura's round backside, causing Sakura to grind slowly into her lap. Sakura trailed open-mouthed kisses down Satsuki's throat, gripping her by her hips and pulling her against her. She loved the way their bodies molded against each other. Sakura's breath caught when Satsuki's hands snuck under her blouse and cupped her. Satsuki squeezed them and molded them in her palms, and Sakura whimpered in her mouth. She found the courage to slide her fingers down Satsuki's stomach to the waistband of her jeans and slide them underneath. Satsuki didn't protest. In fact, she spread her legs apart, granting Sakura a better access. Satsuki groaned against Sakura's mouth as Sakura stroked velvet soft nether lips, slipping lower and feeling Satsuki's wet heat. Oh yes, Sakura would be lying if she said she hadn't imagined a scenario like this. She didn't always think of innocent methods of passing the time with the dark-haired beauty that kept popping up everywhere she went. A masculine voice broke Sakura out of her daze. She narrowed her eyes at the intruder as he apologized and backed back inside the apartment. Sakura turned to look at Satsuki, wondering if the intrusion had changed her mind about what she was doing. Satsuki pressed an open-mouthed kiss to Sakura's throat. And Sakura relaxed in her hold once more. Come home with me, Sakura pleaded, curling a lock of Satsuki's hair around her finger. And what would we do there? Satsuki slurred, but tossed her a heated look that sent more heat to pull in Sakura's lower abdomen. I'm going to tongue you is what I'm going to do. Sakura stared at her Keurig, unsure of what to make of the cold coffee sitting in her favorite mug. Not a thing was ever out of order in her house, and she most definitely would never forget a cup of coffee, especially not her favorite caramel latte pack. Sakura pursed her lips and went to microwave her coffee. She leaned against the counter as she waited and held up a blue and green Metro card in her hand. It couldn't be her card. Hers was placed safely inside a protective sleeve attached to a wrist lanyard, ready to be swiped when she was in a hurry. Her personal phone pinged and she pulled it out to read her new message. It was from Sai. As much as Satsuki enjoyed painting and welding, her favorite thing to do was lamp work. She found it relaxing to mold glass into the intricate sculptures she designed to use fire to bring her ideas to life. A fairy, one of the students observing her asked. She gave him a slight nod, keeping her eyes focused on her heated glass rods. Satsuki didn't work with assistants, but occasionally some of the apprentices would come observe her at work. Because she was mainly a private artist and worked on the commission pieces at Glass and Iron, she worked on pieces that were more enjoyable to observe being created. It was good learning experience. The apprentices would learn new techniques they wouldn't typically use for the stuff they would make for Glass and Iron. At least not for a long time. Did they ask for a pink-haired fairy? Satsuki blinked rapidly, trying to process what the apprentice had said. Considering how focused she was, she couldn't believe that she had used the pink glass rod for the petal dress on the hair of her fairy sculpture. The original plan was all clear glass with the only color being on the dress and wings. It looks nice, prettier, more girly. Satsuki raised a brow at the boy. He flushed red and stammered out an apology. Everyone knew she was sensitive about the fact that she was one of the only women that worked at Glass and Iron. One of them worked in welding and the other woman occasionally assisted on large commission pieces but mostly worked on making the colored glass they used in the shop. There once was a rumor that Satsuki got the better jobs because she was sleeping with Kakashi. It had infuriated the other women. It was insulting. Satsuki mostly found it annoying. She didn't care what people said about her personally. Her skill spoke for itself, and the men in the shop were just jealous that they weren't as talented. It also didn't really affect her that people thought she was sleeping with her old teacher. She knew it wasn't true, and so did Ren, Kakashi's wife. It only irritated her when Kakashi caught wind of it and burst out laughing. He patted her shoulder and sighed out the rest of his laugh. Are you even interested in men? Satsuki prepared to seal her fairy by running it in the kiln. From what her client had told her of her daughter, she knew that the pink hair would be a nice surprise. Are you done for the day? Want to go grab a bite? Satsuki paused in the middle of cleaning up her work area and noticed the younger man still hanging around. There was a blush dusting his cheeks, and she groaned inwardly. She had assumed that his attention was purely professional. It wouldn't be the first time she had caught the eye of one of the apprentices. At her age, it wasn't new anymore that she attracted people with her looks, but it didn't make it any less unwanted. Are you even interested in men? Satsuki couldn't really say she wasn't interested in men. She could at this moment to deter the hopeful apprentice, but it wouldn't be entirely truthful. She just never really thought about them. It was the same with women. It was odd how high her libido was considering she wasn't attracted to either gender. Usually whenever she was in the mood she didn't really know where to turn to, like being hungry and opening the door of a full refrigerator and finding nothing to eat. Her older cousin Shiwi had joked once. Satsuki avoided relationships because she wanted to avoid. Yes, she had a high libido, but she couldn't just sleep with someone and she knew it could cause a strain in a relationship with someone. There wasn't a guarantee that she would engage in a relationship with a person just because she entered a romantic relationship with them. She had never felt comfortable enough. Correction, she never felt comfortable before. There was comfort the other night. Apparently, Satsuki thought dryly. When Satsuki calmed down from her not-so-minor moment of panic, she had curled up on her side under her kitchen table and looked back on the events of that night that she could remember. She remembered 1. Pretending she didn't already know Sakura Haruno's name. 2. Drinking whiskey like it wasn't god-awful without Coke, feeling like she had something to prove to pretty green eyes and a pleasant smile. 3. Soft fingers down her bikini bottoms and really dirty words falling from a cute mouth. Satsuki had gotten drunk around rather friendly people before. Sometimes she wondered if Ka even knew what he was humping when he drank. But she never anyone that wasn't herself while inebriated. But apparently she got well acquainted with Sakura, who had previously just been a pink-haired stranger. A stranger who had at some point had her face between Satsuki's thighs. The more Satsuki tried to ill more memories, all she could imagine were a pair of green eyes shimmering with mischief and a saucy grin before said grinning mouth lowered to give long teasing licks, humming in delight as a small pink tongue added pressure with each stroke. Satsuki felt heat crawling down her face to her neck. She didn't want to analyze the fact she was probably fantasizing more than recalling memories. I'm going home, she announced to no one in particular. Nodding to herself and with her hands on her hips, she grabbed her canvas one-shoulder sling backpack and her utility jacket and left her studio. She shut the door and locked it, preparing to stay out of Glass and Iron until her head was cleared of any intrusive thoughts. Okay. The apprentice stared dumbfounded through the studio's windows as Satsuki just left, completely forgetting he was in the room. Satsuki glared at the strip of paper in her hand with its cutesy fox design. No matter how adorable, the single-day fare card was no replacement for her Metro card. She had filled her card with $20 before she lost it. And owning the pass gave her discounted trips, which she forgot about when she bought the ticket. Satsuki hadn't put enough money on it and couldn't leave through the exit stall. Groaning, Satsuki dragged her feet to the insufficient funds machine so she could put more money on her ticket to pay off her fare. Satsuki would have reported her card missing if it weren't for the fact that she had procrastinated registering her card and couldn't get a replacement with the funds she had added. She had a problem with procrastination. Satsuki could make orders and complete them ahead of schedule, her focus intense on her projects, but everything else fell through the cracks. As she approached the surface, she debated whether she should finally go grocery shopping or order takeout again. As the escalator ride was approaching its end, she decided that she wanted to go to Jumbo Slice. Her mouth watered, thinking about the cheese and the tomato sauce. A pizza slice bigger than her face would be the perfect end to her day. After she purchased her slice, she rolled it into a burrito shape and wrapped it in the foil they served it in to protect her hands from getting sauce all over them. She didn't mind the heat. Munching on her pizza burrito, she thought back on Sakura. It was an intrusive thought. Satsuki was meant to try and forget her, but she couldn't help but picture Sakura in her pretty neat clothes grabbing a greasy slice of pizza in the middle of the night. Satsuki rolled her eyes and shook her head of the image. It was highly unlikely to happen. Sure, it would make sense that someone like her with her busy schedule would stop for a quick bite to eat, but that didn't seem like Sakura. Satsuki felt safe making that assumption, remembering an inebriated Sakura talking about her meal prepping and how she found mason jars salads to be super cute. Satsuki snorted. Once that girl started rambling, it seemed like she would never stop. She just flowed from one topic to the other, taking up most of the conversation, something Satsuki was grateful for. Satsuki was awkward and never knew what to say. Whole conversations could go by without her saying anything just for lack of knowing how to jump into the conversation properly. It was something her older brother Itachi never had a problem with, but apparently didn't get carried onto her. Itachi was aloof when he was a lot younger, unable to get along with kids his own age. He grew out of it as he got older and was actually quite charming. Satsuki was not. The hardest part of her apprenticeship with Kakashi wasn't learning any techniques, but learning how to speak to clients. She appeared aloof to many people, but it was more anxiety of having to be around others than her being cold and distant. She was a happy and friendly child. According to her family, she was just horribly shy with strangers. Satsuki spent most of her youth hiding behind Itachi or her mother's leg, which may explain why her first instinct was to bolt when she noticed she was in bed with an equally as Sakura. Not equally as didn't look anywhere the same when they were. Sakura was softer, curvier, with a much nicer. Satsuki choked on a bite of pizza. What a great time to start noticing stuff like that. Satsuki finally reached her apartment and punched in her code to buzz into the building. One of the first things her father insisted on when she moved out was an apartment with good security. He said he was even willing to help with rent if it meant she would be properly secure. Satsuki refused the offer. She didn't need a doorman or a security guard at night, especially not with all the training she had gotten growing up from her father who was a combat specialist. God, she was glad to be in her own apartment, her own place where her father wasn't around to make her work out all of the time. She hated exercise so much. She preferred sketching with her mother over running miles and weight training. Hey, Artemis. Satsuki greeted her cat. Artemis rolled on his back and let out a big yawn. Bet that's all you did today. Satsuki shuffled into her kitchen and put her kettle on the stove. Artemis followed at her heels, meowing loudly. He rubbed against her ankles when she stood in front of the cabinet that housed Artemis' wet food cans and treats. A diet is a diet, Artie. Satsuki let her tea leaves steep longer than necessary, making it strong and bitter. She poured her tea into a glass mug and carried it over to her balcony. She cringed as she took a seat, eyeing the way her potted forsythia was withering away, the yellow petals now brown and littering the concrete. Satsuki told Yamanaka that she wasn't good with plants, but she wouldn't hear any of it, and insisted Satsuki needed something other than her succulents to brighten up her little deck. Yamanaka's friends with Sakura. Satsuki stared blankly into space. It was starting to get ridiculous how easily her mind drifted in her direction. She didn't want to think about her. Thinking about her made her think about how she wasn't suited for relationships and how she sort of kind of wanted to be in one, but there was no hope for someone like her. Satsuki scowled and drained the rest of her tea. I'm going to go to sleep, and that's the last time I think of a pink-haired cutie. Satsuki pinched the bridge of her nose and muttered a string of curses. It was going to be a tough task. Satsuki was ready to bang her head against something. How did she lose her fare ticket? She was so sure she had put it in her wallet. What's worse is that she put the exact amount she was going to need and hadn't made any mistakes in the total fare. Sighing, Satsuki dragged her feet to the fare card dispenser, ready to press the buttons more aggressively than necessary to purchase a new ticket. Before she could pay for the card, there was a breathy voice trying to catch her attention. "Excuse me." Satsuki shut her eyes tight and turned around slowly. She opened up her eyes and almost screamed when she saw that Sakura was standing there holding out a metro pass outstretched in one of her pretty manicured hands. "I think this belongs to you." Satsuki was sure there was a god of some sort and that they hated her. 4 o'clock on the dot. Sakura was up and pulling on her poly spandex running shorts and pulling on a mesh long sleeve over her sports bra. At 4:03 a.m., she was blending greens and fruit in a NutriBullet and having a breakfast smoothie. At 4:07 a.m., she was out the door and down the steps, unlocking the gate to her apartment. Sakura would go for a run around her posh neighborhood and end up in her shower at 4:35 a.m. She had a timer in her shower to make sure she was out after 15 minutes to give her time to blow dry her hair and style it. At 4:50 a.m., she was blending in her BB cream and applying her lip gloss. Depending on her mood, she would apply mascara, but sometimes she liked to leave her lashes bare. No one else had pink lashes, and she liked being a little different. She had spent too much of her youth wanting to be part of the crowd. As an adult, she appreciated the quirks in her genetics. At 5:30, she was out the door, verifying that town car would be at her address at the appropriate time. Sakura would call again a half hour before Sununade was to leave her home to make sure the car was on its way to its destination. She would then hop on the train that would get her to her boss's town home. She would use the 15-minute ride to read Overson's schedule. For the 5th time, at a little after 6, Sakura was brewing Sununade's favorite Arabic coffee. Sununade strolled in as soon as it was poured into one of her little delicate cups and downed it all in one shot before circling back out of the kitchen. Sakura poured the rest into a serving thermos for Tsunade to take with her for the rest of the morning. Sununade always had her coffee as soon as she woke up. She needed it before she ate, before she got dressed, before she remembered who she was. Only her husband Dan and Sakura were ever recognizable, usually because she would have been shouting at one of them for her coffee. Dan and Tsunade didn't eat meat outside of eggs in the morning. A new diet's implemented to watch Dan's cholesterol. The man really loved his bacon and Sakura tried making him fakin or vegan bacon. Dan looked so sad eating it that she stopped trying to make it for him. After setting their vegetable, egg, white frittata, bowl of fruit salad, and orange juice, Dan also had to watch his caffeine intake. Sakura made sure to pack Sununade's briefcase and get her coat ready at the door. At 7, and Sakura were sliding into the town car Sakura had requested. Sununade was drinking more coffee as Sakura was reviewing with Sununade everything that she was supposed to be doing that day. "You have a consultation with a new patient today at 3 o'clock. So, you will have to visit your office in the hospital today. I already sent an email out to your students that you will not have office hours this afternoon and they are not to try and find you at the hospital." Was Mrs. Delgado able to reschedule her appointment? Yes. Sakura opened up the calendar app on her iPad. "I apologize for the error with the receptionist. I then called your receptionist team to remind them not to schedule appointments during your lecture blocks and reminded them that you needed at least a half-hour window for travel. Anything else? You're to make rounds at the hospital before your lecture to check in on 2 of your patients that were admitted before yesterday and earlier this week. The hospitalist has sent you notes to go over." Sakura reached into her satchel and pulled out a set of paint sample cards. She held them up and gave a very serious expression. "The painters are coming today to paint the study, and you haven't selected which colors you wanted. I convinced them to bring both sets. The set in your right hand. Make sure it's that cream color I adore for the moldings. I can't stand that weird beige. It looks like sad milk coffee." Sakura nodded and clipped the selected paint samples in her notebooks and wrote down where the colors were to be placed. "Can you return the pumps I bought 2 weeks ago?" "Yes, I brought them with me." Sakura nodded toward the shoe box at her feet. "I'll return them when I pick up your order." Sakura only took the town car to the fresh market. She refused to take it any farther because of the fare. Wouldn't have minded paying for her travel, but Sakura wanted to be as low budget as possible. The store to return the pumps wouldn't open for another hour. It was a boutique of Makoto Uchiha's, and she only opened early as a favor for Sakura because Sununade was her favorite customer, for now. She pulled out her mesh hemp bags from her hobo bag and placed the shoe box inside of it. When she was at the Ko's, she noticed they were low on fruits and she usually had groceries delivered, but when she had time, she liked to do the shopping herself. Sakura preferred to do any grocery shopping in the early morning when the stores would be emptier. She could push her cart around and relax without worry of other customers. Sakura was examining Macintosh Applesade's favorite type. They were all good to Sakura and selecting only the prettiest when she heard a charming little giggle. She turned in the direction of the noise and found a young couple teasing each other on the other end of the produce section. Sakura smiled drily at them. They roamed the section, never letting go of each other's hands, flirting openingly. Sakura sighed and scrunched up her nose to shake off the pity she felt for herself. How nice it would be to have someone to do that with. How nice it would be if her only relationship wasn't with the constant chirping of her work phone's alarm. With most of her errands in the city done, all Sakura had to do was head to the town home and monitor the goings-on of the services it needed. Because the cleaning staff and painting crew were to be in the home today, she wouldn't be rushing a homemade meal toad for lunch. She ordered from the bowl a salad bar and asked for it to be delivered to Sununade's office in the hospital where her receptionist would place it in the fridge for safekeeping. Sakura placed her iPad on a stand on the kitchen island and played some music as she put away the groceries. When she finished, she got to work on cleaning the kitchen. It was the one place in the co-residence she didn't allow the cleaning staff to take care of. She cleaned it herself and took pride in doing it herself, the same way her papa cleaned his own kitchen. Sununade's kitchen was one of her favorite places, only second to her papa's kitchen in his confectionery shop. One of her favorite times of the day was when she could take her time to cook up delicious food in the amazing kitchen of the doctor that hired her. Sakura had known for a long time, ever since she was a senior in high school, and her mother had found out she had a blood disorder, was an amazing woman and helped her mother greatly. She took on as many patients as she could and worked non-stop to help her chronically ill patients that weren't being heard by other doctors. But it always seemed as though someone needed to take care of her just as much as she took care of everyone else. When Sakura graduated, she became a temp at an agency where they sent her to fill any administrative assistant positions that were available. When Sakura found out that Dr. Tsunade Senjuko was in the market for a personal assistant, she pushed her way to the top of the list of candidates. Successful in getting the position with her experience and tenacity. Sakura sighed and pulled out everything she would need to make lasagna from scratch, something Dan had been craving and had deserved for doing so well on his diet. It always amazed Sakura how many kitchen tools she found in their residence. As far as she knew, Tsunade didn't know how to cook and that Dan was just as hopeless. The couple never had time to cook, and Sakura thought that was a shame. If she had their kitchen, she would use every excuse possible to cook. This was the kitchen she and her mother dreamed they had. The kind of kitchen she could live in. There was always something warm about cooking food for someone else. Something about making something delicious with the mind to make someone happy and feel cared for. I wonder if Satsuki cooks. Although disappointed and depressed that Satsuki hadn't stayed, Sakura couldn't help when she drifted across her mind. She's so skinny she probably eats healthier than I do. Sakura frowned and then huffed in annoyance. She could also be the type that can eat whatever she wants and not gain weight. How criminal would that be to be that beautiful and not have to work to keep the pounds off like the rest of us? Sakura remembered thinking that Satsuki may have been a little too skinny. Ino had once told her that Sai would get so distracted in his work that he would forget to eat or sleep unless she reminded him. Perhaps Satsuki was the same art over food. Maybe I could make her a proper meal. Sakura paused in the middle of adding another layer of pasta to her lasagna. She frowned to herself, wrinkling her brow and scrunching her nose. Or not. Free time wasn't something Sakura was accustomed to. Dan had come home early with a bottle of wine and had given Sakura the rest of the evening off. He wanted a romantic night with his wife. Sakura had helped him set the table and left him instructions for the lasagna. She left a memo on the glass table that lined the wall of the foyer for Tsunade and bid Dan goodbye, promising to see him bright and early in the morning and that she would honor his request of making her steel-cut almond and berry-topped oatmeal for breakfast. Maybe I should make some scones or do some yoga. Haven't done that yet this week, have I? Sakura frowned at her iPad and her work phone. She was ahead in all her scheduling and work for the week. How was that possible? Oh, right. When Sakura needed a distraction, she got hyper-focused. She worked until she made her fingers numb. She ran and ran until she realized she was 2 trains away from her home. And she baked. She baked a lot. It was only a few days since the morning after, but Sakura had hoped she would be over it by now. She tried to convince herself she just needed that one night to get Satsuki out of her system and carry on with her life. Not like she had time for a relationship. But this moment where she was off early, all work done, and not really needing any more baked treats was time. Time she could do anything she wanted. Time she could spend returning a Metro card that was burning a hole in her wallet. Sakura looked at the escalator that could take her to the other track, leading her away from home, but toward the direction of Old Town, a cute historical district right on the harbor, a district that housed avant-garde galleries that housed glass and iron, the place Sai had mentioned Satsuki worked at, and had also conveniently told her of which line to use to get to it, and what time it was likely that Satsuki would get off of work. Oh, it's Sakura took the escalator up and then down on the other side and hopped into the approaching train heading to Old Town. What am I doing? Sakura jumped in her seat every time the train doors opened and the beeping sound that alerted a stop at a station went off. There was 3 stops before Old Town. 3 chances to get off and change her mind. At the stop before Old Town, she stood up. She stared at the open doors, glaring at them, and then sat back down. No, she was doing this and nothing was going to stop her. She scanned her metro pass at the exit stall and took a deep breath. Inhale for 4, hold for 6, exhale 8, repeat. Sakura relaxed, telling herself she still had to walk to Glass and Iron. Hopefully, the now chilly evening air would help calm her nerves. Sakura started to walk toward the escalators to resurface and choked on an intake of air. There she was, still tall, blue streaks still in her ebony hair, still beautiful, adorable, grumpy expression still present as she scowled at the fare card dispensers. With trembling hands, Sakura pulled out Satsuki's metro pass from her wallet. She approached slowly and in a voice steadier than she felt, she called out to her. Excuse me, Satsuki turned in place, smoky eyes wide in surprise. I think this belongs to you. At 7:37 p.m., Sakura was reconnecting. The medium caramel macchiato, no foam, with soy milk and extra caramel drizzle sitting across from her wasn't the least bit shocking. Something about the sweet, long order drink fit Sakura's image. Satsuki stared at her cafe americano and examined the events that led her to bringing Sakura to the coffee shop. After her metro pass had been returned, Satsuki had just stared dumbly at it and then back to Sakura, who was looking up at her with an oddly adorable, determined look on her face. It had made her ears warm up, and all she could do was mutter out a single word. Coffee. Big green eyes had gone wider than Satsuki thought was humanly possible, and Satsuki was worried that she had somehow broken the other woman. Yes, coffee is good. I love coffee. The words had rushed out of Sakura's mouth, and red bloomed on her cheeks. The eager gleam in her eyes caused Satsuki's chest to lighten in relief. Her awkwardness wouldn't ruin whatever the hell this was leading up to. I'm just thanking her for returning my card, Satsuki tried to convince herself. It was the polite thing to do and what her mother would have expected her to do. She ignored the part of her mind telling her that her father had told her that grabbing coffee was a gateway date, the perfect informal way to get to know someone. The combination of the warm cafe and the way her body heated up due to the awkwardness was causing Satsuki to overheat. She pulled off her leather jacket and sighed, running a hand through her hair, pushing back her bangs. There was a sputtering sound, and Satsuki looked back up at Sakura, who was red in the face and choking on her drink. Are you okay? Satsuki's eyebrows furrowed in concern. Sakura waved her hand in front of her face, signaling that she was fine. Sakura slumped in her seat. She couldn't seem to stop embarrassing herself. She practically shouted at Satsuki earlier when she had brought up coffee. She wasn't even sure if it was supposed to be an invitation or if Satsuki was just bringing it up, just thinking out loud. Now she almost got herself killed by choking on her macchiato when Satsuki flashed some skin. Satsuki was a beanpole, such a skinny thing, but working at Glass and Iron must have been a great replacement for the gym. Her arms were muscular, lean, and fine for her frame. Sakura inwardly thanked the universe for the creation of the muscle T. Sakura could practically hear Ino snickering in her head and telling her, contain your thirst, forehead. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Sakura flashed her a smile, hoping that it came across as reassuring. Sakura nibbled on the Danish Satsuki had offered to buy for her. It made her uncomfortable that Satsuki didn't buy herself a pastry, but she had explained that she didn't eat anything sweet. Peering up at Satsuki through pastel pink lashes, Sakura decided that Satsuki was definitely the prettiest person she had ever met. She completely blew any man or woman Sakura had attempted to date out of the water in the looks department. Satsuki was a lot quieter than anyone Sakura had been attracted to before, but she found it quite charming. Although she didn't talk much, Satsuki was attentive. Sakura found her pretty expressive through body language. It seemed to be something she wasn't aware of herself, and Sakura smiled softly whenever she caught a subtle shift from Satsuki, depending on what she told her. It really is surprising we haven't met before considering you're friends with Sai. I don't really go out much. Sai usually comes to check that I'm still alive. Oh my god. Ino does the same with me. Sakura giggled and then leaned her cheek on her fist. Her body had loosened up the longer they sat at the table. She was so used to sitting ramrod straight as she went about tasks and meetings forcenade that it was nice to just relax. How long have you known Ino? Satsuki winced, hoping she didn't sound as awkward as she felt. She couldn't just sit there and let Sakura take over the entire conversation. I refuse to be worse than Sai of all people when it comes to social interactions. I've known Ino since grade school. Sometimes I want to strangle her. Sakura's voice became rougher at this part, and she pantomimed, choking before her voice became pleasant and sweet again. But I still love her tons. I can't imagine my life without her. Satsuki frowned. What Sakura had said reminded her of someone she was once close to, a family friend that she grew up with, almost like another cousin. We should get going. The green line has its last train of the day in 15 minutes. Sakura's eyes went wide in a small panic. Her time with Satsuki was a lot shorter than she would have liked. Unless you want to take the longer way home and take the red line. Sakura noted the way Satsuki avoided looking her in the eye and the slight dusting of pink across her cheeks. There was a slight tensing of her jaw and Sakura had to hold back from smiling. Maybe she wants to ride home with me. How do you know I need to take the green line? Satsuki's eyes widened and Sakura couldn't contain the snicker that came out of her at the slight look of mortification in her face. I'm just messing with you. Sakura stood up and grabbed her bags. It leaves in like 13 minutes, right? Let's go. Satsuki was baffled. Where was the prim and proper girl she had expected? Sakura was a lot more playful than what she believed she would be considering all of her previous observations. Satsuki thought back to the day she caught her doing a victory dance in her seat on the train. She smirked to herself and rolled her eyes. She should have expected Sakura to be silly. No work today. Sakura her head to the side in confusion. Satsuki had chosen to sit in the seats in front of her. She turned sideways and leaned against the window of the train so she could face her. Sakura noticed the way Satsuki kept her head off of the glass. It probably kept her from banging against it as the train sped off. You usually have something with you. Sakura blushed heavily and shook her head. She should have known that if she could always spot Satsuki somewhere as she moved about the city that the same could be true for Satsuki spotting her. She would be very hard to miss considering she had rose gold hair. Or pink. Pink would be the more appropriate color to describe her hair. No, not today. I've got everything done. For now, at least. Satsuki watched as Sakura dusted her skirt off and hummed contentedly to herself. Besides, the morning she had found herself in Sakura's bed, she had never seen Sakura so calm. She was usually running around, busy with some task, not pausing for a single moment. She quite liked the serene look on Sakura's face. She was enjoying watching it when the conductor announced that they were approaching her station. Sakura panicked. Satsuki was making a move to get off the train and who knew when they would be able to speak again. Do you want to hang out sometime? Wait, what? Satsuki's eyebrows shot up at the outburst, eyes wide in surprise. Do you want to hang out sometime? Sakura spoke slowly, making sure the words didn't just vomit out of her mouth. With me. I mean, do you want to hang out with me? I'm asking you out on a date. Okay. As Sakura rambled, Satsuki's ears burned hot and turned a brilliant shade of red. Unlike when the apprentice had asked her if she wanted to get some dinner with him, Satsuki actually felt flustered. The apprentice had only succeeded in annoying her, but this petite and pink woman had caused her heart to start palpitating and her hands to get clammy. At that exact moment, the train doors closed, and the train departed from the station. I am so sorry. Sakura hid her face in her hands, mortified that she had caused Satsuki an inconvenience. It's not that serious. I can walk from the next station, Satsuki mumbled. And now you can give me your number. Satsuki held out her cell phone toward Sakura, gaze averted as the red tint remained on her ears. Sakura blinked and then looked at the mobile device in awe. This is really happening. Sakura flashed the widest smile Satsuki had ever seen and pulled out her own cell phone. I like to add photos for my contacts. How about you? Satsuki her head to the side and combed her fingers through the tangles of her wet hair. As soon as it was as tangle-free as she could get it, she styled her hair into a French braid. Staring at her reflection, Satsuki pursed her lips and then scowled at the mess she had made. She threw her hands up and decided to leave it as it was. Who cared if a few wisps were out of place all throughout the braid? Sakura, maybe. Satsuki frowned at her reflection and left the bathroom. She was thinking way too hard about the situation at hand. That's not what you're wearing, is it? Shui. Shush. What do you know about women's fashion? Apparently, a lot more than Beanpole. You guys are making her nervous. Ignoring her brother Itachi and his girlfriend and boyfriend, Satsuki moved over to the set of racks along the wall that housed most of her clothes. She stared at the lined-up sweaters and tops and then looked over at the trio sitting on her couch just watching her. Why are you guys here again? Satsuki had called Izumi and had attempted to ask for advice before coming to her senses and hanging up on her as soon as she had answered the phone. Apparently, this had intrigued them because Satsuki never called Izumi or Shui unless it were important. This had caused the three of them to show up to Satsuki's studio apartment. Satsuki didn't want to let them in, but Itachi had thought ahead and ended up bribing her with groceries. She still hadn't gone to buy any, and she had run out of tomatoes earlier that week. Satsuki felt odd about hanging out with Sakura. Sakura said, hang out meaning that the date was casual, right? But did that mean the same way she hung out with Sai or even Ka? Or was the protocol different in this scenario? What was the etiquette for hanging out with someone one had carnal relations with? There was no way she was going to ask her older brother for help with that. I'm just going to dress like I usually do. Tuki, come here. Izumi raised up her arms and clenched her fists, pleading with Satsuki. I'm sorry, but I can't. I just can't let you go out with your hair like that. You're going to get your hands stuck, hun. Shui snickered. Satsuki flashed him a rude hand gesture before clenching her jaw at the pain that throbbed from her scalp as Izum tugged at her hair. That looks painful. Itachi smiled at the glare Satsuki tossed his way. It was incredibly unfair that the one trait she didn't inherit from their mother, Itachi had. His long, silky hair was tied behind him in a ponytail, suiting him better than Satsuki cared to admit. You haven't explained why you're priming. Shui was on the floor playing with Artemis. He pulled at his front legs and made him bounce. Man, this cat is getting fat. Don't do that. Satsuki winced with each tug on her scalp. Each time I made an even more painful pull of her hair, Satsuki was ready to shave her hair. How bad could she possibly look without any hair in her head? If she wasn't wincing, Satsuki was answering every ping of her phone. She only paid for a certain amount of texts per month. But this new relationship with Sakura was having her second guess her cell phone plan. Sakura didn't always have time to be on the phone, and she was quite chatty, so she sent a lot of texts. Although she was always clueless about how to respond, something fluttered in Satsuki's chest whenever Sakura sent her something random. She had a habit of sending Satsuki whatever seemed to interest her. On most days, Satsuki would just send Sakura a photo of whatever she had made at glass and iron. She would use as minimum words as possible to explain what she had created and how. Satsuki was sure Sakura was just being nice when she showed interest in Satsuki's technical talk. Who are you texting? Itachi asked, eyebrow raised. The three older Uchiha stared at her, waiting for an answer. Satsuki's ears burned red in embarrassment, and she refused to answer. I got it. Shui leapt from his seat, startling Artemis in the process and lunged for Satsuki's phone. Satsuki turned her body away from the attack, slamming onto the ground with Shui scrambling over her. Using her longer arms, she kept her phone out of reach. Shui palmed her face and tried to shove her away, but missed giving Satsuki the chance to go on the offensive. Quote exclamation mark. Shui yelled. She bit me. What did you expect? Itachi frowned. The two of them were always going at it. Your sister fights dirty. Shui grumbled. Pain in the you're a pain in the Satsuki stuck her tongue out and then army crawled away. What does she want to keep a secret so bad? Itachi muttered. You boys. Izumi pointed at them with an unimpressed look on her face. Are stupid. Satsuki wasn't going to stick around any longer. She scrambled to her feet and headed back to her bathroom where she could scrutinize her appearance some more. She could still hear her brother and company talking just down the small hall. Have you figured it out? Yeah. Have you, IPF fed? I'm not telling you. Sighing. She opened up the small makeup bag I had bought for her months back. She pulled out a long black tube and twisted the cap to reveal a bristly brush at the end of a stick. Would this be overkill? Would it even matter? She's seen what I look like already. Oh my god, she's putting on makeup, guys. Get out of my apartment. It was a lot quieter than Sakura had expected. Sure, she knew Satsuki wasn't the talkative sort, but after a week of texting back and forth, she didn't expect for such a heavy lull in conversation. I should have picked a better place. Sakura had selected a beer garden for their first date. It was a cute rooftop place with lattice awnings covered in strings of lights. It was casual enough, but Satsuki had made a comment that had caused Sakura to flush a brilliant shade of red. Should we be drinking? Sakura had tried to change the venue, but Satsuki had insisted that it was fine. Sakura took a large swig of her pint of impossible to pronounce German beer and snuck a peek at Satsuki. The mascara the other woman wore made her already fluttery lashes fuller, and under the dim lighting, the shadows casted on her cheekbones were even more pronounced. It's nice here, Sakura almost choked, not expecting for Satsuki to fill in the silence. So far, Sakura had been taking responsibility for making sure the conversation kept going. My friends usually drag me to the ugly mug, which is a little rougher around the edges. I like the fairy lights here. Fairy lights. Satsuki had stiffened up, just noticing her slip. Sakura had to refrain from cooing at how adorable it was that Satsuki referred to strings of lights as fairy lights. It made her wonder if Satsuki had decorated her room with Christmas lights growing up. Perhaps she still did. I like your rings. Sakura took the chance to slide her hands underneath Satsuki's palms. She rubbed her thumbs over the glass that decorated Satsuki's slim fingers. I made them. Sakura wasn't at all shocked that Satsuki had created her own jewelry. Satsuki had shared enough photos of her work that Sakura knew she was capable of making beautiful, beautiful things. The glass made Sakura think of her father who worked with sugar sculpting. It was so similar, delicate, but impressive when the finished product was revealed. They're really pretty. You don't worry about breaking them. They're sturdier than you would think. And I'm careful. Their little table was a lot quieter than the rest of the garden, but Sakura no longer felt awkward. The quiet was a welcome peace after a hectic week full of running around and millions of phone calls. There was something so welcoming about the warmth that radiated from Satsuki's hands. The walk home from the beer garden to her apartment wasn't very far. It allowed Sakura to clear her head a bit so she could cram some work in before bed. She didn't mind the chill that seeped through the fabric of her coat. It was hard to mind it when Satsuki walked alongside her, their steps mirroring each other perfectly despite the differences in length of their legs. There was a tingling in her hands, an itch as her shoulder brushed along Satsuki's arm. Sakura would have liked to have held hands on the way home, but Satsuki had crammed her hands into her jacket pockets as soon as they left the beer garden. Holding hands might have been an unwelcome public display of affection. Dinner and drinks had gone well, but there was still plenty on Sakura's mind. Did Satsuki enjoy herself as much as she had? Would she like to spend more time in her company beyond this night? If they weren't holding hands at the moment, would it be strange and too forward to kiss her goodnight? Dating was never Sakura's thing. The lack of dates was usually one of the causes of the termination of most of her relationships. She was always too busy, and when she was able to meet up with her significant other, there was an uncomfortable atmosphere. Sakura never spent enough time with them and it made them strangers, and every meeting was almost like repeating an awkward first date. Was Satsuki's hiding of her hands a bad sign? An omen of what was to come? Sakura shook off the feeling. It was too early to start getting depressed and mourning a relationship that had just begun. Here's my place. Sakura climbed up a few steps to signal the end of their journey. She smiled softly down at Satsuki, admiring the soft glow of the street lights and the way shadows danced across her flawless skin. But you already knew that. Sakura teased. Satsuki sputtered out a few unintelligible words and her ears turned red, causing Sakura to giggle. Taking advantage of how caught off guard she was, Sakura braced her hands on Satsuki's shoulders and slanted her mouth over Satsuki's. She could feel Satsuki stiffen under her touch, but eventually Satsuki slowly moved her mouth against hers and hesitantly took hold of Sakura's waist. Although Satsuki's cheeks radiated off a pleasant warmth, the tip of her nose was cold as it brushed against Sakura's face. Call me when you get home, Sakura asked as she pulled away. She didn't know why, but there was a little voice in her head, a feeling that told her she needed to let Satsuki go home. She needed to give the other woman space and not pull her in and smother her with all the affection she wanted to give her. There was a hesitancy about every move Satsuki Uchi made that made Sakura want her to feel safe with her. Wanted nothing but to leave room for this woman to move at her own pace. Satsuki nodded, reverting back to her quiet shell. It was cute how bashful she was, and Sakura couldn't help but kiss her forehead, taking advantage of the steps to her apartment, making her taller for once. Good night, Satsuki. She paused after opening the gate. We should hang out again. Satsuki didn't give a vocal agreement, but the soft smile she gave Sakura made her giddy nonetheless. It was better than an enthusiastic reply. Yes, Sakura really liked this quiet person and the warmth they gave off. She was annoying her with her humming and her cleaning. Ino had invited Sakura over for some much-needed girl time. It seemed lately that all Sakura did was work out, and spend time on her phone. Will you sit your down for 1 second? Sakura frowned, but paused in her current task of reorganizing Ino's desk. She had been sitting on one of Ino's tufted chairs after having already tidied up the living room of any out-of-place items, her eyes flickering to Ino's messy desk and back to Ino until finally giving into her urges and fixing the mess of invoices and bills and balled up and scrapped sketches. How do you live like this? Sakura tried to defend herself by gesturing wildly to Ino's desk. If you think that's bad, you should see my closet right now. Ino watched amused as Sakura's cheeks puffed out in frustration. You're just with me now, aren't you? Or maybe I just want you to organize my closet. Ino let out a cackle as Sakura's face turned a brilliant shade of pink. It was always fun to tease her best friend considering Sakura was horrible at hiding how it affected her. You're such a pig. I can't believe you brought me to your sty to hang out. I'm just messing with you. Ino rolled her eyes and pouted. Come on. Can you really stay mad at me? Ino fluttered her lashes at Sakura and made pouty faces until they both burst into a fit of laughter. Okay, honestly, I do want you to come with me to our house. This client is the most fickle person ever, and she's always changing her mind about how she feels about her home. She's fussier than my mother. Ino wrinkled her nose in disgust and grabbed her design book and pastel blue handbag. Sakura groaned, but pulled on her coat and wrapped her blanket scarf around her head and shoulders. Shopping with Ino could be fun, except when she was shopping for one of her clients. Although Ino had her own car, she almost never drove it unless she was taking small enough pieces over to her clients that weren't being delivered. Sakura was always making her walk and use public transportation if she wasn't working. I swear she's going to want to change everything around again after Thanksgiving, and I'm already stressing out over her holiday decor. Ino tucked her trench coat neatly underneath as she took her seat on the train. I've made 3 design books for her Christmas decor. She wants her stuff to come from Aldic. Aldic Sakura. I may actually just fly to LA to see everything in person myself. Ino, aren't you worried that she's treating you like a personal shopper instead of a designer? Sakura didn't mind being sent out to buy things for Sun, even though she was a personal assistant. In fact, it was one of the things asked of her, but in Ino's case, her job was to come up with designs, not be told by her clients what they wanted her to get. Oh, I'm still designing. It's just that she treats her furnishing like outfits. It's her money. She can do what she wants. Ino paused to take a sip of her chai latte. Once she got started dishing about one of her clients, she almost never stopped. What I am worried about is that Sai wants to move in together. You've been dating for like 5 years. Ino. Sakura rolled her eyes and huffed. Leave it to Ino to be so dramatic about something that shouldn't be such a big deal considering how in love the two of them were. He stays at your place enough for you guys to be considered living together already. But I don't want to get rid of my brownstone. Ino wed and leaned over to lay her head on Sakura's shoulder. It's perfect and I love it too much. Sakura patted Ino's head and rolled her eyes at her antics. Ino was a trust F fun baby and was able to secure a lovely brownstone town home near the design district of the city. Sakura was envious of Ino's beautiful patio and the fact that she had an actual backyard but refused to move in with her best friend when she had been hunting for a place in the city. Sakura's parents had a house in a suburban neighborhood a 30-minute drive outside of the city, but growing up visiting her father's shop downtown made her long to live in the cute posh neighborhood of Northwest Konoha. She lived right behind her father Kazashi's store in a gated apartment complex nestled between the rows of shops. The apartment complex was so well hidden. It had taken Sakura years to discover the apartments despite growing up in her father's kitchen. Why would you have to get rid of your brownstone? I'm sure Sai wants to stay in the Glen Forest area. Ino slumped in her seat, no longer caring about keeping herself pristine and presentable. And I know that it will literally be the only thing the man asks for when it comes to living together. And it would make me such a witch if I deny him that. Sakura sighed and avoided answering by taking a sip of her latte. In her opinion, Sai would gladly move into Ino's brownstone as long as she agreed to wanting to actually live together. Sometimes Sakura felt like Ino just wanted to create drama on her life so that Sakura wouldn't think she had such a perfect life. It frustrated her knowing Ino was trying to make her feel like she wasn't the only one that ever had relationship issues. Ino was just blowing the situation out of proportion. Not that she was going to tell her that. At least not at that moment when they were having a relaxing trip. Sakura was setting up a reminder to make Ino's favorite pudding in order to make the process of convincing her to ask Sai about how he felt about her town home easier when Ino caught her off guard. So, how's your love life going? Oh, here's our stop. Ino literally hopped off the train and onto the platform and then hooked her arm with Sakura's, refusing to let go. Sometimes I feel like I should just introduce you to one of sis' friend. There's this one person like she's hot, but she's more of a hot mess. She's probably the only person I know worse off than you are when it comes to dating. I don't think Satsuki has ever been on a date. Sakura had chosen the wrong time to try and drain the last of her latte before entering the home furnishing store. She took the liquid down the wrong pipe and started choking. Ino thumped on her back until she stopped. Satsuki Hasai had texted Sakura about Satsuki's missing fare card, so she had assumed Ino had known that the two of them were already acquaintances. Although acquaintances would be the wrong term to describe the two of them, Sakura and Satsuki had gone on more dates after their night at the beer garden. They had visited a few art galleries and gone for walks around the harbor. Whenever she had an early day, Sakura would ride the train to Old Town and pick Satsuki up from work so they could ride home together. It was out of the way, but watching her skull-like pout and flushed ears made it worth it for Sakura. Face-to-face meetings were always better than phone calls and texts. And I want to do better this time, Sakura kept telling herself. She has gone on dates, Sakura replied, voice rising a few octaves. She tried to avert her gaze from Ino, but the blonde had gripped her by the chin and pulled her face up so that she had to look her in the eye. What? Ino shrieked. Ino were in public. The public be damned. Ino's face flushed a splotchy red. Why am I just hearing about this now? Forehead. Because it's a very delicate relationship. Ino snatched Sakura's wrist to make sure she wouldn't run away. We're talking about this, Sakura Haruno. We're talking about this now. Sakura groaned but let Ino drag her into the furniture store. It would be easier to just give in than try and fight it out. The last time Sakura tried to run away from a talk with Ino, the woman had chased her for blocks and had even climbed the gate for her apartment complex. This was going to happen eventually. About 5 minutes later, Ino had given up on trying to shop and had dragged Sakura to pick up snacks and wine. I need to be at least buzzed for this conversation. Why do we need to have this conversation at all? Sakura whined as she helped Ino juggle all of the bags of junk food into her townhouse. The both of them were going to complain later about ruining their diet. But if she was going to talking about her love life with Ino, Sakura preferred to be elbow deep in a large bag of chips and shoveling ice cream into her mouth. Maybe because I'm your best friend and the last time you even tried to go on a date was what? When we were still in college, Ino rolled her eyes and placed her hands on her hips. I thought you gave up on dating for good. I did not give up dating for good, Sakura denied. She denied it, but her stomach squirmed in discomfort from the truth. Although love was something Sakura had always wanted, it was never her priority. In hindsight, she could have done better with potential partners, but she always left them in the back burner when it came to her studies and work. The failed relationships should have been a lesson in learning how to balance her life properly, but Sakura instead chose to just cut out certain aspects of her social life. It was better to avoid it than to potentially hurt someone and herself. So, what's different with Satsuki? Ino laid sideways on an armchair and munched on a donut. Of all people, why bother risking that with her? Sakura asked herself that constantly. Simple attraction wasn't enough to warrant pursuing someone in a relationship after swearing off relationships. But there was something about Satsuki that kept pulling her in, making her want to know more about her and what made her happy or upset. Things she wanted to cause and prevent. It's not something that can really be explained, just that it's something I feel. I don't see how that can possibly make you more productive. Satsuki dragged her hands down her face to uncover her eyes. She turned over on her side and found Kakashi squatting so that he could look at her properly as she was lying under her workstation. I'm thinking, well, can you think faster? I need to know soon if you need assistance so I can pull people from my production floor. I prefer working alone. I saw your commission order. A piece that size isn't possible to make on your own. You're not going to waste my glass by attempting to do so. Satsuki just stared at him before sighing and crawling out from under her work table. She hadn't been thinking about work and should have gone back to preparing for her latest piece. The commission piece would be enough to pay for her funds for 2 months, which she could try and create some pieces for the next glass and iron showcase at the Factory Art Center. Kakashi housed some of the Facto's resident artists at Glass and Iron because of the type of studio space required for them. Most of the artists with focuses in 3D studio art such as ceramics, glass, and welding came to work in Glass and Iron. Occasionally, Satsuki would catch one of the resident artists running one of the Glass and Iron workshops for extra cash. When Kakashi was running late or caught up in one of Ren's errands, she would just walk away to her own workroom, pretending she hadn't seen a thing. I looked at some of your designs for next year's catalog, by the way. Kakashi picked up one of Satsuki's torches and then put it back down. Satsuki held back from placing it back exactly as she had left it, knowing he was trying to strike a nerve. I liked one of your jewelry pieces. I think it could end up being pretty popular, especially for a spring collection. I didn't design that for manufacturing, Satsuki muttered. Ah, I see. It's a little acute for you. I mean, compared to your usual stuff. It's not for me, Satsuki mumbled. Oh. Kakashi chuckled as he looked at the slight flushed look on Satsuki's face. I see. It's fitting. Very fitting. Shut up. Satsuki scowled and shoved her stuff into her bag. I'm going home a little early to be calling it quits for you, isn't it? Don't tell me you have a date. Satsuki sped up and turned the corner, refusing to answer. Oh, underscore. Kakashi muffled his chuckle by adjusting his bandana over his lower face. She did in fact have a date. Satsuki was in a rush to get home and make sure everything was organized. I should have never agreed to this. It was an odd day in which Satsuki was working, but Sakura was off. On those days, sometimes they would meet at the coffee shop near Glass and Iron, and they would grab a quick bite before heading back home. Sakura had texted her earlier and asked if she could come over and cook for her instead. After eating out at restaurants often since the two had started going on dates, Sakura was bound to be sick of it and want to eat homemade meals. Sakura sometimes reminded Satsuki of her mother. As much as Satsuki loved easy-to-grab fast food, Makoto Uchiha would rather chop off her own hand before eating or feeding her family greasy fast food. At least I'm not the one cooking. There were very few dishes that Satsuki could actually make, which is why she preferred going out to eat so much. She enjoyed sketching away with her mother, but when it came to the kitchen, it was one of the places Satsuki dreaded going into, unless it was to snag some food. She highly doubted that Sakura would be impressed with any stir-fry she cooked up or spaghetti. She's coming to my apartment, Satsuki muttered to herself as she passed by the local market. It was different having Sakura come over than anyone else. Sai and Ka just popped in whenever they wanted. Itachi always brought Shu and Yumi with him. It was usually irritating having any of them over, but it was kind of exciting thinking about Sakura wanting to come over. Satsuki was worried that eventually Sakura would tire of their relationship. Sakura was always taking the initiative to invite her outer for kisses. Satsuki really liked Sakura's kisses. At first glance, Sakura seemed the type to use sweet-flavored glosses like vanilla or strawberry or even cherries. Satsuki was always pleasantly surprised by the smell and taste of mint. But that's all they did. Kiss. Satsuki didn't mind, but it did worry her a bit that Sakura hadn't tried to make any type of move. It worried her because as nice as it was that Sakura wasn't pushy, she didn't want her thinking she had to sacrifice that aspect of a relationship for Satsuki's comfort. Especially since Satsuki was sure she didn't mind that aspect at all. In fact, just Sakura giving her space and putting her comfort first made her want to try having again. Sober this time, but that would mean having to take initiative. Unless Satsuki spoke up, nothing was going to happen. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. She couldn't do this. Sakura took a deep breath to relax and closed her eyes. Letting out a long exhale, she finally pressed the button on the call box for Satsuki's apartment. Talking with Ino had made Sakura nervous. Although Ino and Sai had dated for 5 years and Satsuki had been friends with Sai ever since they were roommates their first year of college, Ino didn't know much about her. She's kind of a mystery because I've never seen her in a romantic relationship. Ino had gotten comfortable on her love seat and loose-lipped as she finished off the bottle of wine they bought. There was this blonde boy that kept coming around, but she never seemed happy to see him. It wasn't until we were like 21 that it seemed that the guy finally got a clue that she didn't want him around. That or she finally got a restraining order, but other than that, Sai and I sort of came to the conclusion that her maturity is stunted. Hello, Satsuki's voice crackled over the intercom. Did you order delivery? Sakura joked. She could have sworn she heard a snort before Satsuki responded. Give me a sec and I'll be down there to help you carry your bags. I'm fine. Just buzz me in. There was a short pause before the buzzer went off and the lock on the door clicked. Sakura grabbed her hemp bags full of groceries and strolled into the elevator. Setting the bags down for a moment, Sakura used the reflection from the elevator doors to check herself out. She combed her fingers through her hair and smoothed her top, making sure there weren't any wrinkles. By the time the elevator arrived at Satsuki's floor, Sakura had finished with her check and was holding the bags of groceries so that she couldn't be caught off guard when Satsuki met her out in the hall. Hey, Sakura smiled fondly as Satsuki nodded in greeting and took the bags from her. She followed her down the hall to the last door on the floor. Sakura's heart began to race from the excitement. She always wondered what Satsuki's apartment looked like. How someone's apartment looked said a lot about them. Don't. With a hand on the doorknob, Satsuki started, but then trailed off. Sakura raised an eyebrow at her and Satsuki looked up to the ceiling, sighing. Don't expect too much. What's that supposed to mean? Sakura giggled, which caused Satsuki to frown. My place. It's not much, but it's mine. All right. Sakura rolled her eyes and let out another giggle. Sakura had no idea what Satsuki was so worried about. Posters and paintings covered the brick-exposed walls. There was a cat tree in one corner on the opposite side of the large room just behind what seemed to be sectioned off as a sort of living room. A futon, a love seat, and set of bean-bag chairs surrounded a glass coffee table with a set of tall open-panel bookshelves that cut the room into another section. Peering through the shelves, Sakura assumed the section behind them had to be a pseudo-bedroom that Satsuki had created. Your place is officially cooler than mine. Satsuki hummed in response. Although she hadn't so much as twitched at the comment, Sakura could just tell that Satsuki was pleased with how much Sakura liked her place. Oh, hey you. Sakura is adorably plump white cat brushed up against her ankles. So friendly. Yeah, he's a Artemis will take affection from anyone. Artemis, interesting name. You like Greek myths. Satsuki mumbled something lowly and Sakura grinned slightly having caught what she had said. Didn't take you for a fan of magical girls. Sakura bumped her shoulder against Satsuki's. Come on, show me your kitchen. Satsuki was doing her best to stay out of the way. She sat at the small table she usually used to toss her mail on instead of for dining like she originally intended. She organized her mail in the basket her mail was supposed to go in before Sakura arrived so that there would be somewhere to eat besides just settling on her futon. Sakura was really in her element bustling around Satsuki's kitchen. Satsuki barely used her kitchen and it was kind of nice seeing someone make use of it. How do you live like this? Sakura waved her hands in exasperation, worrying Satsuki because she was waving a knife around. How do you not have at least half of the stuff I brought with me? Satsuki snorted. There was nothing she would possibly make that required something called vermouth as an ingredient. Some of the things Sakura had listed off sounded familiar, like something her mother had possibly prepared before, but Renzino and Pushito were just so foreign to her. Wouldn't it have just been easier for Sakura to say she was cooking fish? You could have made me a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, and that would have been impressive enough. Oh, shush. There was a pleasant sort of buzz, a nice tingling feeling on her scalp as she listened to the chopping of Sakura's knife. There was just something very comforting about someone cooking her a meal. It was also having someone sit across from her at her little table. Ever since she moved out, Satsuki rarely sat down at a table unless she was visiting her parents. Even when she joined Itachi, Izumi, and Shisui for dinner, they usually lounged around their living room. This is really good. I'm glad you think so. They ate in silence, and for once, Satsuki wasn't worried about what Sakura thought about how quiet it was. They were just two people sharing a meal. The increase in comfort might have also come from being in the privacy of her home. Satsuki hadn't considered that before. She was so much more relaxed. So, what do you do for fun with no television? Sakura was lazily shuffling around the apartment after dinner, just checking out everything that Satsuki owned. I have a laptop, Satsuki scoffed. I watch stuff online. Okay, I need to know. What is this? Along the wall that led to the hall with the bathroom and laundry closet was a vitrine of the most unusually collection of glass items. Every piece had something that seemed so off about them. It's the glass graveyard, Satsuki explained, opening up the cabinet. I started learning lamp work when I was 16, and I suck so bad that I ended up with a collection of failures. How are these failures? Sakura pulled out a single marble out of a box of many similar ones. I can't tell how this one is bad. The particular marble Sakura was holding was one of the many implosion marbles Satsuki had made before they had started dating. Bursts of the palest green with gold flecks bloomed inside a clear sphere that she had never intended to make. It belonged with the failures because they were proof of how distracted she had been thinking about the pretty jadey girl when she should have been working. It's amazing how something so small can be so pretty. Sakura blinked up at Satsuki who was smirking down at her. Heat creeped up her face, and she was sure her cheeks were red. I'm not that short. You're just really tall. Sakura pouted and stormed over to the futon, picking up Artemis and placing him on her lap. Artemis instantly started purring up a storm once Sakura started to stroke his back. Your owner is so mean, Artie, she cooed in a mock baby voice. So very, very mean. Don't talk to him like that. Satsuki joined her on the couch and frowned at Artemis. He had settled more comfortably in Sakura's lap, pressing his face against her stomach. I don't think she likes me very much. Sakura continued to talk to Artemis as if Satsuki weren't sitting right there. Nope. Guess I'll just have to give you all of my attention now. Funny, Satsuki muttered. Not entirely sure what was so amusing about talking like that. Shui did it occasionally just to annoy her. Satsuki stared pointedly ahead at the figurine on her coffee table. What was she supposed to do now? Just being in each other's presence was enjoyable, but was it really enough? Was it enough for Sakura? A few seconds passed and there was a slight pressure on Satsuki's right arm. Out of the corner of her eye, she peered at Sakura, who had allowed herself to relax and lean against Satsuki's body. Fingers slid down her wrist and soon enough, Satsuki was holding hands with Sakura, their fingers interlaced. If either one of them was going to make a move, this would have been the right moment. Satsuki waited and she waited. She had expected Sakura to try and kiss her. They were cozy in the private of her apartment, and yet Sakura wasn't making any attempts. It was a little frustrating just how considerate Sakura was. She didn't have to turn to celibacy just to be accommodating. It really was starting to seem like it was up to Satsuki to initiate intimacy. Swallowing, Satsuki turned slightly so that she could face Sakura. Sakura just tilted her head in confusion, smiled encouragingly and waited for Satsuki to speak up. Looking at her clear jade eyes with its floating gold flecks almost distracted Satsuki from her goal. Hesitantly, she pressed her lips against Sakura's more plush ones. Sakura made a slight startled noise, but closed her eyes, and Satsuki followed suit, melding her mouth with hers clumsily. It wasn't a first kiss, but it was the first one where she took the lead. Satsuki gripped Sakura's hip to pull her closer, ignoring Artemis' cry of annoyance as he made his escape. Don't overthink it, Satsuki thought to herself as she traced Sakura's lower lip with her tongue. It was something she copied from Sakura, and it ended in the result she was hoping for. Sakura opened her mouth to grant Satsuki access and allowed for things to become more heated. Sakura huffed in frustration and crawled onto Satsuki's lap until she was straddling her. With that, Satsuki lost control of the situation, and Sakura was leading again, pressing kisses along her jaw and down her neck. Small and gentle fingers slid underneath Satsuki's crew neck, nails scraping against her rib cage, eliciting a strangled groan from Satsuki. The sound was enough to snap Sakura out of her lust-induced haze. Satsuki could practically see the mental scramble to find a way out of their compromising position without actually looking as though she were running away. Sakura's every thought showed on her face, eyes expressive to a fault. What's wrong? Satsuki narrowed her eyes at Sakura, who averted her gaze. And nothing, just Sakura bit her lower lip before turning an apologetic look in Satsuki's direction. I don't want to be pushy. Pushy. Satsuki's brows furrowed in confusion. Wasn't she the one that initiated everything? How are you being pushy? I kissed you. Yeah, but that's kissing. That's different than then what? Satsuki asked, although she was confident that she knew exactly to what Sakura was referring to. Satsuki hadn't removed her hands from Sakura's hips and took the chance to grip them tightly and pull Sakura towards her. Being treated so carefully as though she were somehow fragile was getting to be so annoying. No one can make me do anything that I don't want to. If I don't like something, then I'll tell you that I don't. Satsuki punctuated her point by swiftly removing her shirt, baring herself to Sakura. So, it's okay. Sakura smiled shyly, unable to keep the hopeful tone out of her voice. Of course, it is. Satsuki scoffed. So, if I wanted to, Sakura brushed the pads of her fingertips across Satsuki's skin, trailing up until she could do this. It's okay. Satsuki inhaled as Sakura continued to move her thumb in a circular motion across the hardened peak. And this Sakura hand through Satsuki's thick hair and tilted her head back to kiss her properly. It's okay. Satsuki's voice came out breathy after they pulled apart. Sakura's hand that had been giving attention to Satsuki's tiny but sensitive ghosted down her torso and played with the waistband of Satsuki's jeans. What about this? Sakura's asked softly as she deftly unbuttoned Satsuki's jeans and snuck her fingers down them. It's okay. Satsuki gasped out when Sakura began to stroke her nether lips in a gentle massage. Yeah, Satsuki nodded and Sakura stroked more inward, brushing against her bundle of nerves. It was more than okay. Sakura had woken up much earlier than Satsuki. It was a combination of being an early riser and also having woken up in the middle of the night to make sure she had an alarm so that she was awake when the trains started running again. Satsuki's face was smooth of the dimple between her eyebrows from them always being drawn down and her mouth was slightly parted without the slight downward curve they had. Sakura smiled at the slight fluttering of her eyelashes as she slept. So cute. Sakura would have loved to have spent all day just like that, cradling Satsuki's head in her arms and their legs intertwined. But sadly, adult life was calling to her, and she had to head home so she could get ready for work. Tuki, Sakura murmured, pressing a kiss on her forehead. It's time for me to go, Satsuki groaned and pressed her face against Sakura's chest. She wrapped her arms around her torso, refusing to let her go. I have to go to work, Sakura giggled. She hadn't expected Satsuki to act so spoiled. Come on, let's Sakura let out a yelp as Satsuki ran her tongue over her. Sakura opened her mouth to scold her when Satsuki wrapped her lips around the same and sucked on it. Sakura was mentally calculating how much time she could sacrifice to spend more time lounging around with Satsuki when the other woman flopped back to sleep. Don't start anything you can't finish, Sakura grumbled, pulling away. Satsuki woke up hours later to an empty bed. The sheets on the other side of the bed were cold, even though they still smelled of lavender body soap and apple shampoo. Satsuki was, which normally would have been fine, but she felt unusually colder than she normally would have. She rolled on her back and stared at the ceiling. There was something unsettling about the silence that filled her apartment now that Sakura was gone. There was no sound of another person breathing. There was no slight rustling from a second body moving under the sheets, adjusting for comfort. This doesn't feel too good. Satsuki spread her arms and legs out wide. Since when has my bed felt so big? Satsuki sighed and closed her eyes. Ah, I see now. Sakura sighed, glad to set all of the shopping bags she was carrying down on the seat next to her. She was lucky that she made it on the train before rush hour and would have a seat to protect her bags from getting crushed. She had just closed her eyes to take a calming breath when her personal phone started ringing. Hello. Oh, so now you answer your phone. Hey Karin, Sakura yawned. I'm using the metro right now. That's always your excuse. I'm just warning you in case I get cut off again. Sakura rubbed the back of her neck. She should have called a car service. How's the miss? Tenten is great. She says hi and lots of love. At least she would if she weren't sleeping. Still not good with long car rides, huh? She was super excited after you sent that photo of the early snowfall, but my girl just passed out. Are you guys sure you're ready for the cold? I had to stop her from buying one of those bulky bubble jackets. Karin gagged over the line, and Sakura giggled. She was so excited to hang out with her married friends again. It was already after Thanksgiving, and Sakura was busy preparing for the upcoming holiday. It was nice to know that Karin wasn't letting family issues keep her away from her hometown. I'm going underground soon, so I'll lose signal. Yeah. I'll see you at Enos's tonight, right? I actually have plans tonight, so I'll see you tomorrow between errands. What? Oh, no. Don't you dare hang up on me, Sak. The line went dead once the train went into the tunnel. Sakura shook her head and stifled a giggle. She knew she was going to be getting an earful later when she got to meet up with her friends. Ino had blabbed to Karin that Sakura had a new girlfriend and Sakura knew that Karin was waiting to see her in person to get all of the details out of her. Sakura sighed and flipped through her call log. She hadn't been able to talk to Satsuki in a few days because they both were busy with work. They were texting and had made plans for that night, but she was feeling just a little lonely, not having been able to actually hear her voice because their schedules weren't syncing up. This is usually around the time I get dumped. The last person Sakura had dated was always busy with work, and she felt like she was more someone of convenience. Just someone that she would meet up with when they craved another person's touch. He had ended their relationship and Sakura was left to wonder what was wrong with her that she kept attracting inconsiderate people. So far, she seemed to be lucky with Satsuki. There wasn't a moment she felt like she was only a partner of convenience, and even though she felt lonely, at times she never felt neglected. Satsuki gave short replies, but she also checked in on her and asked her how work was going. Sometimes Sakura would get that text right when she was feeling low and exhausted and she would feel cared about knowing that Satsuki was understanding of her job and that was something she needed. Satsuki was running late. She was always punctual for everything but due to single tracking she was running late to her date with Sakura. It was an irritating position to be in considering she made sure to be on time to all dates because Sakura was always busy with work but still made time for her whenever she could and never kept her waiting. And she's so patient with me. Satsuki had expected Sakura to have grown fed up with their relationship by this point. There was always a sick feeling welling in her stomach that Sakura would prefer someone that had more experience when it came to romantic relationships. There were moments when it felt as though Satsuki was standing at a metro station waiting for her train, but it never showed up. All the other passengers boarded their trains, but she was still waiting for hers to arrive and remained alone at the station platform. Entering adulthood, Satsuki ignored that feeling. She had school, a portfolio to work on, and things like figuring out what her peers had just didn't seem to be important. And then when she was in college, she realized she didn't care if she ever did understand what they had figured out. It was too bad a certain former friend of hers just couldn't get that through his thick skull. Satsuki had decided she was content with loneliness. She had her family and her lamp work. She didn't need anyone else. But when Sakura smiled at her or got really excited over something and her pretty jade eyes would gleam and Satsuki's chest would flutter and grow pleasantly warm. And all the more wonderful the feeling when she was the one that caused that happiness or excitement. Satsuki spotted the rose gold strands peeking out from Sakura's cream-colored beret. She was standing outside of the brasserie, cupping her hands in front of her mouth and blowing warm air on them. You should have waited inside. It's kind of crowded and I didn't want you to miss me. Sakura pulled at Satsuki's utility jacket and smiled shyly, her eyes glowing. We missed our reservation though. Yeah, there was single tracking. Satsuki sighed and peered in through the windows. It is crowded. How long until another table opens up? An hour. Unless we sit at the bar, then we can be seated now. Satsuki eyed the crowded bar. Can do that. Or we can go somewhere else. Sakura suggested, tilting her head in the direction of the street. Maybe a slice of pizza. Are you sure? Satsuki frowned. Sakura was being accommodating again. Dinner wasn't the point of meeting up. Sakura intertwined her fingers with Satsuki. I just wanted to see you. No matter how long I had to wait, you're dressed a little too nicely for jumbo slice. Satsuki fingered the collar of Sakura's cream-colored peacoat. She was wearing her usual posh fashion. No one has ever dressed too nicely for pizza. Sakura giggled and tugged on her arm. In fact, we could pick up a pie and head to my place and have a night in. Satsuki bit her lower lip, eyebrows drawn forward in a frown. There was an implication in a night in, and today wasn't one of those days that Satsuki felt comfortable with that kind of evening. It's just a night in with pizza and maybe a movie. Sakura squeezed her hand reassuringly and possibly some cuddling. Satsuki laughed through her nose and nodded. She readjusted their fingers and they walked side by side, sharing each other's warmth. It was something so simple and so nice. This was something Satsuki needed. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.